But one of the things I really was excited to kind of talk more about that you alluded to when you were talking about the rough was the difference in your mindset or someone's mindset and their confidence and how they feel when they're in the rough. When, like you mentioned, like if they weren't really, like they haven't really worked out, right, or they're not really strong throughout their entire body, they might spend more time trying to figure out, like, I got to worry about my hand position in the club, like you mentioned, because they don't feel confident in their preparation. They don't feel confident in their strength, their grip strength, for how they can place it. Whereas with all this stuff that you're doing, you feel very confident. You're not second guessing things. You're going in there and be like, all right, the ball's here. This is what I know I need to do. And your confidence just allows you to go in with a plan, see it, and execute it.
We're preparing for the ultimate goal. The gym is disconnected from the course in terms of, like, we're preparing you to be able to handle any situation that you could possibly come across.
Yeah.
A lot of my training for golf is both to generate power from the ground, because that's just natural. Whatever your gear 3 was when you were trying to hit the ball as hard as you possibly could, gear 4 becomes your just fairway finder swing, which some people will understand, but it's the one that you can hit most accurate. But now that's faster because you're generating more power from the ground, which creates more speed. And then by doing these things, it's also making it so somebody can walk 18 holes 4 days in a row while they're recovering, instead of being more tired on Sunday when it really matters and you got to push for that win. And then also, it's just like all these little situations like the rough that we're talking about, right? If you know that you're strong and then you can handle those certain lies, right, then you can just take a freaking swing at it. And then, but golf's so between your ears that it's like, you can think yourself out of golf way before you can play yourself out of golf. And by thinking I might not be able to, when you're over top of something, instead of being like, all right, this might not come out as clean as I want it to, but let's take a line where it's not going to go out of bounds. Let's pick a club where if it comes up a little short of that because the rough's thick, that's fine. But we're not worried about it spraying right or you pulling it left. You can still take your swing at it. Then that just becomes a 99% possibility that you're going to be hitting the ball exactly like you said you would, but you're not thinking about, what if I don't get this club through this grass? You know what I mean? You're going to be able to get it through. And most of the time, like, what do they say? Grip the club like a baby bird in your hands. Well, sometimes you can't do that. And if you have a better grip strength, right, and you're going through freaking 5 inches of rough in a PGA tournament, then you can grip it harder and you can hit it harder. And make sure that that isn't just something that's festering in the back of your mind when you're over it. And that's more powerful than anything else, is just not have that second bit of doubt when you're getting over it. Because if you swing thoughts are the worst thing that you can have, right? On the course, you want to not be thinking when you're over the ball. That's the most beautiful place that you can be when you're playing golf.
I love that. And that's it. It's one of the biggest things for any athlete playing and competing at the highest level. You always hear them when they're in the zone, right? Or they're in that flow state where they're so present that, like you said, they're not even in their head. They're just there and they can execute, because now they don't need to think. They don't need to try to prepare. Now it's just observing, seeing, and executing on all the preparation they've put in leading up to those moments.
Yep.
And that level of confidence, I think another thing to even mention too, because you mentioned, like, especially with when you have back-to-back days of like 18 holes, that's a lot back to back to back. It's a lot of time on your feet, but it's also a lot of time in here where you're trying to see, okay, based on how I'm starting, how does it need to look based on other people? And when you have those constant doubts in your mind, or these fears or what if scenarios, that is draining your energy mentally and physically, and it's making you less present when you're out there.
Yeah. I just had this conversation. One second. I'm Googling.
Yeah.
Because this is going to come out. I wanted to make sure I had the exact number. So what I was talking about with my PGA player that we're starting to ramp up for this year in preparation for a very long season next year, right? Is getting into a place where he's not more tired on Sunday than Thursday, because your body, you don't want your body to be the thing that is draining energy from your thought process. And if you feel more exhausted from walking 18 holes a day, which is a lot, right? Walking 18 holes a day, by Sunday, when you could possibly be going for the win in a tournament, but now your body's not cooperating how you want to be, and you're not be able to generate as much power from the ground. Let's work through our daily training to make it so we're putting ourselves in a place to be more recovered, or just as recovered on Thursday as Sunday, by the amount of work that we put, because the body adapts. So if you put your body through that stuff on a daily basis, right, it gets used to it. The best thing I can say is I do 10 minutes of lunges a day. My legs never get sore. When I started, I could barely walk after I started, right? The body just adapts. But in golf, it's just like playing chess, right? You're trying to think your way around a course just as much as you are playing a sport, right? But this is thinking your way around a sport for 4 hours straight a day, where you have to keep your mind just as sharp on hole 1 as it is on hole 18. And the amount of calories that your brain burns when you're running at a high rate just thinking, this is what I was looking up. Chess players that are playing at a high level can burn 6,000 calories a day just sitting down thinking, playing chess.
And I think that's
6,000. I burn like 3,500 calories a day, and I'm a pretty active person, right? But I'm not sitting down and doing chess. It's because of exercise and the way that my
what
metabolism runs. But your brain burns just as many calories as your body does. And in golf, you're doing that twofold, because you're getting all these steps in, you're walking on this terrain, and then you have to think about every single shot and every outcome of every shot, and then what you're going to do on the next shot from there. And it's almost like playing chess while you're doing it, or that's how it should be at a high level, right? You
yeah.
can be a pretty bad golfer and know how to think your way around a golf course and shoot good scores still.
I think there's so much to be said around the mental energy utilization. I think no one ever really discusses that, talks about it, or takes that into consideration when it comes to recovery or fueling. Like, we might be fueling the brain with obviously the nutrients we're consuming, but we don't ever think about just how much energy the brain is also using ver- in various times, whether it might be, closer to that game time or around the match. You're using more mental energy, mentally visualizing, preparing, playing through scenarios so that you're confident and ready. And even honestly, like the stressors of everyday life. And if for those that can't necessarily disassociate from those stressors, it literally weighs on them, because the subconscious mind is constantly trying to solve these problems that are in our thinking brain. So even though it might not be at the forefront of our brain, it is still a drain. It is still consuming energy. It's a question mark. Anything that's a question mark, the brain wants to figure out. If we don't figure it out in that moment, and we don't say we're going to disconnect from this and it'll come back later, we're like, nah, we're just going to repress this, push this down, and ignore it. It's still running. It's still pulling energy. I think that was a great that was a great thing you pulled up there in regards to like the chess, and how much energy is actually being used with the thinking brain in a sport, if you will, that doesn't seem like physically demanding, right? Because you're just sitting there moving pieces on a board, but it's such a great awareness to see. Oh, just because they're not physically expending the same amount of energy doesn't mean the total energy expenditure isn't high, and also needs to be addressed for recovery purposes. Because if you think about it, right, most from the nutritional side of things, right, when you're getting plans or programs from other people, it's more around just your body weight and just a physical output, but there's no thought around the mental energy input output and how that actually impacts the overall caloric intake and expenditure, and how that impacts your ability to recover day after day, especially when you're in season or in those very big tournaments where you're playing back to back to back to back, whether it's back to back each day, you have multiple games in a day. That is mentally and physically draining. I think that's
Yeah,
a great
that's what
point.
I'm saying. But they're trying to battle both of these things. When if you prepare the right way, you can take the physical out of it completely. And now it's just the
Yeah.
mental test that you're going through while you're on the course.
And
And
even the mental side of things, there's ways that we can approach this in how with the mental training, you're teaching your brain to look for the opportunities and the possibilities that are there, and it doesn't waste time and energy trying to process, and it'll start to pick up on what to do much more efficiently, so your thinking processes become shorter, quicker. You come with the solution. Energy saved, energy conserved is energy being able to deliver into that swing, into that sport or whatever.